Hello, Nova family, to yet another snowy Sunday morning. We miss being with you in person, but your safety is our highest priority, so here we are, recording in our offices and participating online. But we're so glad for these resources and that we can still come together and study Ruth. We are halfway through the book of Ruth now, so grab your Bibles and join us as Pastor Jasmine reads chapter 3 out of the NRSV version.
If you'd like to follow along, today's text comes from the book of Ruth, chapter 3, the NSR-VUE version. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is your kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went down to lie down at the end of a heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant, for whom you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then I, as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that the women came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the city. She came back to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." This is the word of the Lord.
Chapter 3 contains the climactic events of the whole Ruth story. If you missed the sermons to the first 2 chapters, make sure you go back and watch those to catch up. You can pause here and come back when you're ready. It is the beauty of technology, right? Yes. So this chapter begins with Naomi expressing her desire for Ruth to find security. At the very end of chapter 2, in verse 20, Naomi is the first to actually realize that Boaz is a kinsman redeemer. Now, Pastor Marion talked about what a kinsman redeemer was last week, but let's dive a little bit deeper. There are 2 parts of this at play here, the lever and the goel. The lever, we talked about this in chapter 1, but it's just for a quick recap here. The leveret refers to an ancient marriage institution. When a man dies without children, the name of the deceased man can be perpetuated through his brother or next of kin, and through the widow having children, the deceased man, now his namesake and genealogy can continue. It's purely that. It's the lever. Then, on the other hand, we have the goel. The goel is the protector and redeemer of both land and people. And since women were not allowed to own property in ancient time, the Goel also unlocks in this legal hold to land, property, financial investments that the deceased may have owned. And even though Boaz has been extremely kind and generous in the text, to Ruth in his fields to glean, there's no proof anywhere in the text that he even assumes he's next in line to be the kinsman redeemer. In fact, just as Pastor Jasmine had read from the text, there's more than one person in Naomi's kin group who could secure Ruth and Naomi's future, as well as the land that was under Elimelech's name. But Naomi has a lot of the puzzle put together. She says to her daughter-in-law that she wants her to find security. And the word we said the first week is munuha. And Naomi says in the first verse here, she says, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you." She wants the best for Ruth. No doubt it hasn't been easy for them as widows. And Ruth has been doing some backbreaking work, gleaning in the fields, for who knows how long. Naomi wants her daughter-in-law to rest and live out some of her youth and that she's clearly lost in becoming a widow. She wants Ruth to have a family. She wants her to be cared for. She wants her to be loved. She wants her to be a mother. Naomi has been there. She's not a dictator. She's a mentor, and she's moving with grace. She's wise. She knows her culture as an Israelite, and her recent realization that Boaz is kinsman puts her mothering skills kind of into hyper mode. So Naomi goes on to say here in verse 2, "Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor." Okay, let's talk about these terms a bit. A threshing floor is a large circular and flat outdoor space where farmers would separate the grain from other crops that they might be growing. Though there are some private threshing floors, it was way more common that threshing floors were shared, communal spaces. It's also where community social interaction, the economy activity would occur. Families would gather, helping each other to make sure that winnowing could be done after a large harvest. Because it's a shared space, it could have been common practice for a farmer and his workers to sleep on the threshing floor at night to keep watch over the harvest and to ensure that their livelihood was not stolen or tampered with. Then there's winnowing. What's winnowing? Great question. So glad you asked. Here's a picture of what winnowing looks like. Now, most of us don't farm, and even if we did, we have a lot of machines to do the work for us now. But winnowing is how they separated the grain from the chaff. This would usually happen in the evening when the winds would pick up, usually from the west, and they would throw the grain into the air so that the wind could carry the chaff a distance away while the grain could fall to the floor. And this would be done on the threshing floor because it was a large enough space for both threshing and winnowing to happen simultaneously. I mean, who wants to move harvest around more than they have to, right? So Naomi instructs Ruth to change out of her mourning clothes. And she says here in verse 3, "Now wash and anoint yourself and put your best clothes on and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking." Okay, to wash and anoint here was basically referring to women in preparation for marriage. The same context and wording is used in Esther when she's prepping to meet King Xerxes. So it's clear to Ruth and that Naomi is asking her to go do this bold ask of asking Boaz to be her kinsman redeemer. But Naomi also tells Ruth to stay hidden because Boaz has to finish eating and drinking because timing is everything. Now Naomi goes on to say here in verse 4, "When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." The word for feet here in Hebrew is margala. And yes, it derives from the word foot, but it's also a euphemism for legs or like nether regions, if you know what I'm saying. So when Naomi says uncover the feet, or maybe uncovering something else more tender and private, there's actually three key aspects happening here. Well, there's more than three, but we're just going to talk about three in this context. First, lying down at his feet signals that Ruth's desire for him is to fill the role of kinsman redeemer, as we've talked about. It's a marriage proposal. Super uncommon for females to be the one proposing at this time, but in this specific act, Ruth is symbolically showing her humble submission and vulnerable position. Second, in the uncovering of feet, it's a direct request for protection and stability. You can't get more direct than that, than uncovering, things. That's very tender. And third, contextually, the terminology used here and for the rest of this chapter, it holds quite a bit of sexual suggestive overtone. However, with that said, most scholars suggest that the actions of this chapter were public, it was in the threshing floor, it's out in the open, but it was discreet enough to present a culturally acceptable and legal way of asking for marriage. Naomi's instruction for Ruth is to go and uncover Boaz's feet and lie down below him, and simply a plan to just get his attention and let him know he's a possible candidate for kinsman redeemer. Naomi was confident that Boaz would then tell Ruth what to do from there. But as we'll see coming up in this story, it's Ruth who actually ends up telling Boaz what to do. She's maybe a little bossy. I love it. And she totally is justified in what she asks, according to basic principles underlying righteous Israelite living. So Ruth changes out of her mourning clothes here, and she gets cleaned up and heads down to the threshing floor that night. Ruth does everything Naomi instructs her to do and waits until Boaz falls asleep. She uncovers him and then lays down at his feet. And then in the middle of the night, Boaz startles awake and sees Ruth lying there at his feet. He says here in verse 9, he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." Okay, this verse is the big ask. It's the proposal. Cloak in Hebrew is the word kanaf, and it refers to the cloak end or the corner of the cloak, and it's also a word that describes a wing, as in like the shelter under God's wing. It's a covering, and because Ruth has uncovered Boaz, his response to her would be an answer, and he would take the next step to recover himself, which would mean no, just himself, or he would cover him and her, which symbolically also covers Naomi and their future family in the process. However, the words "spread your cloak" can also serve as an idiom for conjugal activity. Like I said earlier, the rest of this chapter has quite a bit of sexual overtones and idioms. It's definitely not the version we got as kids in Sunday school with the flannel boards, but here we are. So Ruth makes her intentions very clear to Boaz. She asks him if he'll redeem her and Naomi's family through marriage, and Boaz once again is amazed that Ruth is so loyal to Naomi and her family, and he says this in verse 10 and 11. He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman." Here we see Boaz as he's legitimately surprised, not only by her showing up in the middle of the night on the threshing floor, but clearly he believed that she had other prospects. Boaz is aware of how much older he is than Ruth, and he's blessing her because he's recognizing that she had some sort of autonomy in her choice of husband. Maybe she had other pursuers, younger pursuers. We don't know for sure why Ruth didn't choose a younger husband, but cultural context tells us that she and Naomi would not have had access to Elimelech's property if she married outside of her clan. Ruth could have been taken care of. It's possible that she could have been married to someone younger and even richer, but it would have canceled out the vow and covenant that she made to Naomi in chapter 1 that pledged her life to her. So ultimately it goes back to the security and rest that Naomi wants for Ruth and her generations to come, and also continues Elimelech's genealogy. So Boaz says, "I will do for you all that you ask." There's a shift here in the humility and servitude. In the beginning of this chapter, Naomi is the one that's telling Ruth what to do. In verse 4, it shifts where Naomi tells her that once she does all that has been instructed, that Boaz will tell Ruth then what to do. And verse 9 is where Ruth is asking Boaz to cover her here, and Boaz is turning everything kind of upside down. And instead of telling Ruth what to do, like Naomi said would happen, he is instead promising to do all that Ruth has asked. The text reads that Boaz promises to do all she asks for the assembly of my people, knowing that you are a worthy woman. Okay, let's unpack that section. What does it mean for the assembly of my people? In Hebrew, it reads as Kol Shayar Yami. What does that mean? Great question. It translates to literally the gate of our people. The gate functions as a metonym for a political body or the town that is responsible for legal or political affairs within the community. It's basically their justice system, and it oftentimes takes place at a literal gate. All marriage and property transactions are conducted there. And Boaz is showing this character, his character here, by telling her that not only will he do what she's asking, but he's going to do it correctly. He's going to do it right from the get-go. And Boaz is saying here that he will redeem both Ruth and Naomi legally before the town elders at the gate, so that the people of the community will know, just as he does, that she is a worthy woman. In Hebrew, it's Eshet Chayel. Eshet Chayel means a woman of noble character. It's the same term used to describe the Proverbs 31 woman. Language matters here, my friends. Ruth herself has only ever referred to herself as a foreign woman. In fact, the word for that is nokri or nokriya. It's a foreign woman that's not only an ethnic foreigner, but it's a woman who's not suitable for marriage, whether it's because she's a Gentile or she was divorced or whatever deemed her unworthy at that time and in that culture. But Boaz never refers to her in that way at all. In fact, he calls her worthy. He calls her Eshet Chayel, worthy, noble, of great value. And Boaz goes on to tell Ruth now that the only caveat is that there is another kinsman closer related than him. He doesn't just say yes to a new wife and access significant property. He wants to go, yet again, the honorable route and give the man that has the birthright, the first right of acceptance or refusal. He's showing so much integrity that he won't usurp another man's right to act responsibly first. Boaz then says in verse 13, "Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." It's the middle of the night. So instead of sending her away, he asked her to stay. And the word here for lie down Hebrew is actually the same word for lodge. It's the same word that Ruth says to Naomi in 1:16 when she says, "Where you go, I'll go. Where you lodge, I will lodge." So instead of sending her home in the middle of the night, which is dark, dangerous, she could get hurt, unaccompanied, where anything can happen, he's telling her to stay where he can watch and protect her until morning, when there's light and it's safer. He's also highly aware that he had to protect her reputation. He didn't want the town spreading gossip about her spending the night with him. So now we're at this point, as we had said earlier, there's quite a bit of sexual overtones in the words that are used in this chapter. There's also a debate here whether there's any kind of business time happening at the threshing floor. There's enough scholarly research that points more toward yes than no. However, the Mishnah, which is a rabbinic literature that contains the core and concise code of Jewish oral law, it notes that any man that even is suspected of sexual relations with a Gentile woman is excluded from participating in a levirate marriage with her. So there we are, clear as mud. Do with that what you will. Anyway, so it's early in the next morning, and Boaz puts 6 measures, it says 6 measures of barley in her cloak and sent her home to Naomi. The author clarified 6 measures, but not what the measurements were. So here's the process of elimination that we could do. We know what an ephah is. We talked about this last chapter. It's a measurement that can be anywhere between 30 pounds to 47.5 pounds, depending on which system they were using to measure it. If we did the math, and there were 6 ephahs, that would be a minimum of 180 pounds for Ruth to carry home. Now, I'm not saying that Ruth wasn't strong, but that's just a lot of weight. There's another measurement that I spoke about a lot. It's called the umer. The umer is 1/10 of an ephah, okay? It's what they used to measure manna when it was falling from heaven, where they collected it in Exodus. But this would mean that Boaz was only giving Ruth 3/5 of what she had garnered in the day's work from chapter 2. It seems that he would have given more than that in this situation and in this context. And the third one is that there's a measurement that that's most likely to be used here. It's called the seah. It is a third of an ephah. So let's do the math. If we guess conservatively toward 30 pounds of an ephah, so a third of that would be 10 pounds. 6 measures of 10 pounds is 60 pounds. I'm not sure why they didn't just say like 2 ephahs would be the same. I think they were trying to be like grandiose about it, but here we are doing mental math at the end of chapter 3. So for those of you who said that we don't need math after high school, look at us. Fun times for all. Anyway, when Naomi sees this, she asks Ruth for all the details of the night, and Ruth says this in verse 17. He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Okay, the word empty-handed here is rechem. It's not commonly used word. It's like actually not written a lot in the Bible, but when it is used, it holds this meaning that relates to a clan member who has worked under the authority of a wealthier clan member. So Deuteronomy 15 in 13 and 14, it says this. And when you send a male slave out from you, a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide for him liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress, thus giving him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Okay, so the slave or dependent member is not released or sent away empty-handed, but rather they are released with a generous bonus of sorts. They are sent out with provisions not only from the flock and winepress, but also from the threshing floor. So you've got meat, you've got drink, you've got grain. You are covered for a while. Here, we're seeing a shift from chapter 1 when Naomi had said that she left full but came back empty. And here, Boaz is pre-addressing all of this even before he redeems them, reversing the emptiness to fullness again. The first week of this series, I spoke about how this whole book is about a loving chesed kindness of all the characters, just toward each other. And we're seeing it play out very clearly and specifically in this chapter. We're seeing Naomi's chesed kindness toward Ruth in her security and her future. At the beginning, Ruth is now consistent. She has a consistent chesed kindness toward Naomi, giving up her whole life for her. And now we are actually seeing Boaz, his chesed kindness toward Ruth, so much so that he's not only providing for her from the fields, but he's doing all that she is asking of him. We're seeing here in chapter 3, faith, humility, divine providence that comes from ultimately a good man, a good God. He's reflecting a good God and a God-mirroring opportunity for redemption. Ruth 3 shows a pivotal moment where faith, humble action, meets loyal redemptive love, orchestrated by God, leading toward security and fulfillment, much like Christ offers the grace of humanity. This main application for us is this. How do we do the same? How do we lead with humility to those most different from us? How do we hold a faith that is bigger than us? And how do we trust a God to provide when things look most hopeless? Family, God was the God of redemption back then, and he is the God of redemption today. So hold tight to that promise. For deeper study of this, join us in our deep dive this Thursday here at the Nova offices. But until then, my friends, stay safe, stay warm, and continue leaning into the goodness of God. God bless you all.